Joining us to discuss this is Mohammed Reza Farzaneghan, who's a professor of economics of the Middle East at Philipps University, Marburg, and he's joining us from Marburg in Germany. Professor, thank you so much for your time. So these official figures, which show that 2 million people, 2 million direct job losses from this war, with some economists warning of 10 to 12 million more at risk, half of the Iranian workforce. How, first of all, accurate are these estimates, and what sectors are hit hardest in Iran?
Well, the major sector which is driving this high number of new unemployed labor force is the service sector in Iran. And this is mainly because of course, the damage of the war and the sanctions, which were on the Iran before starting of this war, but also the main factor is the internet shutdown from the beginning of this war, that the Iranian authorities, for the security reasons, and the concerns cut the internet, and this digital economy of Iran, which is functioning based on the internet connection, has been damaged since the 28th of February. So many of these numbers, the significant number of these new unemployed numbers coming from the digital economy. But of course, the industries which were damaged during the war, like metal industry, oil industry, chemical industries, are also contributing to these significant numbers that we have heard from the Iranian authorities.
Right. Another significant number is, of course, the plunge of the Iranian Rial to record lows. What mechanisms are accelerating this currency collapse, and how is it affecting Iranian household incomes in an already sanctioned economy, even before this conflict?
Yes, the depreciation of the Rial, of course, was expected. So Iran is currently facing multiple shocks: the war shocks, sanction shocks, and the confidence shocks, the uncertainty in the market. And it is, of course, it's not surprising to see that the Rial is losing its value, because the supply of hard currencies have been significantly reduced as a result of this U.S. blockade and the difficulty for Iran to export its oil. The demand side, of course, is also an issue. So for the import, we need the hard currency. So this imbalance basically result to depreciation of Rial and appreciation of the hard currency in Iran. And the uncertainties that exist in the market and the businesses is also amplifying this depreciation of the Rial at the current time in Iran.
What about the oil sector, Professor? How severely is the U.S. blockade disrupting oil revenues, and what are the timelines for production shutdowns due to storage limits?
Yeah, Iran was able to export around 1.5 million barrels per day, even during the 40 days war with the USA and Israel. But now, since the start of this U.S. blockade from the early April, that has become much more difficult for Iran to export its oil. This is the new development. We are also observing the new sanctions from the U.S. administrations on the demand side of Iranian oil. So it's not only the supply of Iran which is under the embargo, but also the U.S. is increasing pressure on the demand side by sanctioning the Chinese independent refineries. A few of them have been newly under the sanctions. The China government, of course, is opposing this development. But that shows a new trend, which makes the Iranian oil export much more difficult, even through the informal channels. Iran has lost also its connection with the U.S., with the UAE, basically trade linkages, and that has amplified this difficulty that Iran had to export its cargoes from the southern ports of Iran.
Yeah, and Professor, as you say, Iran has endured decades of sanctions prior to this war. How much further strain can the economy absorb, and what policy responses might mitigate the economy's freefall?
Well, Iran has been under these pressures since decades. The sanction is not new. We had the Obama sanctions in 2012, and then the Trump sanction in 2018 and the 19 maximum economic pressures. So Iran has been managed to adapt itself to these pressures. So adaptation, of course, is not the same as resilience. So the economy can adapt itself to the pressure, and it's working and functioning at the lower welfare levels. So the question is whether the society can basically exercise this resilience and remain supportive of the ruling system in Iran.
Right.
And this is what the inflation makes the situation much more difficult for Iranian society.
Right. And so even if, everything was to be resolved in the very near future, if the blockade on Iranian ports was to be lifted, how long would it take for the economy to recover?
The parts which is related to digital economy, those sectors, service sector which relied on the internet connection can recover quickly, I would say. That is the easy part. The more difficult part is, of course, those industries like metal industries, petrochemical industries, oil industries, which have been damaged as a result of direct military attacks by the US and Israel. And that takes these reconstructions a more longer term. And that requires a significant amounts of investment from abroad. As you said, that depends on what is happening on the sanction situation. If the sanctions continue to remain in place, of course, these duration of recovery would take much more longer for Iran.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor, for your insight. Very interesting to talk to you about this. Mohammad Reza Farzaneghan, a professor of economics, joining us there from Germany. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.